The stagecoach rattled into Fort Laramie, Wyoming on a blistering August afternoon in 1876, and Felicity Bennett could barely keep her hands from trembling as she clutched the worn leather bag that contained everything she owned in this world. The bruises on her throat throbbed with each bump in the road, hidden beneath a high-collared dress she had deliberately chosen that morning, and she prayed that the man waiting for her would be nothing like the monster she had left behind in Kansas City. Through the dusty window, she could see the rough frontier town sprawling before her, all wooden buildings and dirt streets, so different from the cramped boarding house where her uncle had sold her correspondence to the highest bidder after her parents died of cholera 3 months ago. The stage driver called out their arrival, and Felicity felt her stomach twist into knots. She had exchanged exactly 4 letters with Kade Norwood, a cattle rancher who needed a wife to help manage his homestead. And in those letters, he had seemed kind, thoughtful, nothing like the men who had brutalized her in the city. Her uncle's business partner, a man named Victor Crane, had grown obsessed with her after her parents passed, convinced that she belonged to him simply because he had offered to pay her uncle's debts. When she refused his advances, he had wrapped his thick fingers around her throat in the alley behind the boarding house, squeezing until dark spots danced before her eyes, whispering that if he could not have her, he would make sure no decent man ever would. That was when her uncle had hurriedly arranged this marriage, eager to be rid of the problem she represented and the danger Victor posed to his own business dealings. Felicity had agreed immediately, desperate to escape, even if it meant traveling nearly 1,000 miles to marry a complete stranger. She touched the collar of her dress again, making sure it covered the purple and yellow marks that still discolored her skin 2 weeks after the attack. The stagecoach lurched to a stop outside the Wells Fargo office, and the driver opened the door with a cheerful greeting. Felicity stepped down onto the wooden sidewalk, her legs unsteady after 3 days of travel, and immediately began scanning the crowd of men gathered nearby. Her instructions had been simple. Kade Norwood would meet her here at 3 o'clock on August 15th, and they would be married by the town preacher before heading to his ranch 5 miles outside of town. A tall man separated himself from the others, moving toward her with a confident stride that made her heart race. He was younger than she expected, perhaps 26 or 27, with sun-darkened skin and sharp blue eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. His brown hair was slightly too long, curling at his collar, and he wore the practical clothing of a working rancher. Worn denim pants, a cotton shirt with the sleeves rolled to his elbows, and a leather vest that had seen better days. A pistol hung at his hip, but his hands were relaxed at his sides, not threatening. "Miss Bennett." His voice was deep and surprisingly gentle, with a slight drawl that marked him as someone who had spent his entire life in the territories. "I am Kade Norwood. Welcome to Fort Laramie." Felicity managed a small smile, relieved that he looked nothing like Victor Crane's stocky, menacing frame. "Mr. Norwood, thank you for meeting me." He reached for her bag, and she handed it over gratefully, trying not to wince as the movement pulled at her sore muscles. Kade's eyes followed her hand to her throat, where her fingers had unconsciously risen to adjust her collar again, but he did not comment. Instead, he gestured toward the main street with his free hand. "The Reverend is waiting for us at the church, if you are ready." "I thought we could get the formalities done first, then have supper at the hotel before heading out to the ranch. Give you a chance to rest after your journey." He paused, his expression softening slightly. "Unless you need more time. I know this is all happening mighty quick." "No, I am ready." Felicity squared her shoulders, determined to appear stronger than she felt. "The sooner we can leave town, the better." Something flickered in Kade's eyes at that statement, a question perhaps, but he simply nodded and offered his arm. She took it, grateful for the support, and they began walking down the dusty street toward a small white church at the far end of town. The sun beat down mercilessly, and Felicity could feel sweat beginning to form beneath her heavy traveling dress, but she kept her collar buttoned high despite the discomfort. The ceremony itself was brief and perfunctory. Reverend Thomas, a kindly older man with wire-rimmed spectacles, led them through the traditional vows while his wife served as witness. Felicity's voice shook slightly when she promised to love and honor Kade Norwood until death parted them, but she meant the words with a desperation that surprised her. This man was her escape, her salvation, even if he could never be anything more. When Kade slipped a simple gold band onto her finger, his hands were steady and warm, calloused from years of hard work but surprisingly gentle in their touch. "You may kiss your bride," Reverend Thomas announced with a smile. Kade hesitated, his eyes meeting Felicity's for a long moment. Then he leaned down and pressed a chaste kiss to her forehead, so quick and respectful that she felt tears prick at her eyes. It was the first time a man had touched her with such consideration in months. They signed the necessary papers, and suddenly Felicity was no longer Miss Bennett but Mrs. Norwood, a married woman with a new name and a new life stretching before her. Kade paid the reverend, shook his hand, and then guided Felicity back out into the afternoon heat. "There is a decent restaurant at the hotel," he said as they walked. "Nothing fancy, but the food is good and filling. You must be hungry after your journey." Felicity nodded, though in truth her stomach was still too knotted with anxiety to feel much appetite. She was acutely aware of Kade's presence beside her, tall and solid, a stranger who was now her husband. What would he expect from her tonight? The thought made her mouth go dry with fear, memories of Victor's attack flashing through her mind. The hotel restaurant was cool and dim after the bright street, and Kade led her to a table near the back, away from the other diners. He ordered roast beef and potatoes for both of them, along with coffee that arrived strong and black in thick ceramic mugs. Felicity wrapped her hands around her cup, grateful for something to do with her nervous energy. "Tell me about your ranch," she said finally, needing to break the awkward silence. Kade's expression eased slightly, and for the first time she saw genuine warmth in his eyes. "It is nothing grand, but it is mine. 200 acres of good grazing land, a solid house that my father built before he passed, a barn and outbuildings. I run about 300 head of cattle, sell them to the railroad buyers when they come through in the fall. I have 2 hired hands who help during busy seasons, good men who have their own cabin on the property." He took a sip of his coffee. "It is hard work but honest. I think you will like it there. It is peaceful." "It sounds wonderful," Felicity said, and meant it. Peace was exactly what she needed. Their food arrived, and they ate in companionable silence. Kade did not press her with questions about her past or her family, for which she was grateful. He seemed content to let her adjust at her own pace, and that consideration touched something deep inside her guarded heart. They were nearly finished with the meal when Kade finally spoke again, his tone careful. "Felicity, I want you to know that I will not rush you into anything you are not ready for. I know we are married now, legally and in the eyes of God, but I also know you do not really know me. The house has 2 bedrooms. You can have your own space for as long as you need it." Felicity looked up at him, startled by his unexpected kindness. Most men would have considered her body there right upon marriage, regardless of her feelings. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "That means more to me than you could possibly know." Kade nodded, and something in his expression suggested he understood more than she had said. They finished their meal, and then he paid the bill and led her outside to where a sturdy wagon waited, hitched to two patient horses. He helped her up onto the bench seat, then climbed up beside her and took the reins. The ride to the ranch took about an hour, following a well-worn trail that wound through rolling grassland dotted with cattle. The landscape was beautiful in its stark simplicity, all golden grass and endless sky, so different from the crowded city streets Felicity had known all her life. She found herself relaxing slightly, breathing in the clean air, letting the vast openness soothe her frayed nerves. Kade's ranch came into view as they crested a low hill, and Felicity felt a flutter of something almost like hope in her chest. The house was larger than she expected, a solid two-story structure built from local timber and stone, with a wide porch that wrapped around the front and side. The barn was equally well constructed, painted a cheerful red that stood out against the prairie backdrop. Chickens scratched in a fenced yard, and she could see a vegetable garden that looked well tended despite the late summer heat. "It is beautiful," she said softly. "I am glad you think so." Kade brought the wagon to a stop in front of the house and jumped down, then came around to help her descend. His hands on her waist were firm but impersonal, setting her gently on her feet before releasing her immediately. He retrieved her bag from the back of the wagon and led her inside. The interior was clean and simply furnished, clearly the home of a man who lived alone but took pride in his space. The main room served as both kitchen and living area, with a large fireplace dominating one wall and a sturdy table with chairs near the windows. Doors led off to what she assumed were the bedrooms. "Your room is upstairs," Kade said, heading for the staircase. "It gets better ventilation up there, stays cooler in the summer. I will take the room down here." Felicity followed him up the stairs to a pleasant bedroom with sloped ceilings and windows that looked out over the prairie. A large bed dominated the space, covered with a colorful quilt that looked handmade. A dresser and washstand completed the furnishings, and everything was spotlessly clean. "This was my mother's room," Kade said quietly, setting her bag on the bed. "She passed 5 years ago. My father could not bear to stay here after that, so he built himself a smaller cabin on the north pasture. He died 2 years back, left this place to me." He turned to look at her, his expression serious. "I know this is not what you probably imagined when you agreed to come out here. I know we are strangers, and I know something happened to you back east that made you desperate enough to marry a man you had never met. I will not pry into your business unless you choose to tell me. But I want you to know that you are safe here, Felicity. I give you my word on that." The sincerity in his voice made Felicity's throat tighten with emotion. She reached up automatically to touch her collar, then froze, realizing what she had done. Kade's eyes followed the gesture, and his expression shifted, becoming very still. "It is hot up here," he said carefully. "You might want to change into something cooler. I will be downstairs if you need anything." He left before she could respond, his boots heavy on the stairs. Felicity sank down onto the bed, her heart pounding. She should change out of her traveling dress, should unpack her meager belongings, should do something productive. Instead, she sat frozen, trying to process everything that had happened in the past few hours. She was married. She was in Wyoming, 1,000 miles from Kansas City and Victor Crane. She was in a beautiful house with a man who had promised not to force himself on her. Finally, she stood and unbuttoned her dress, letting it fall to the floor. The cool air on her overheated skin felt wonderful, and without thinking she reached up and unbuttoned her collar, pulling it away from her throat. The relief was immediate, and she closed her eyes, allowing herself this small moment of comfort. She changed into a simple cotton dress, one of only 3 she owned, and this one had a lower neckline that would be far more comfortable in the heat. She had gotten so used to hiding the bruises that she forgot, just for a moment, that they were still visible. By the time she realized her mistake, she was already halfway down the stairs. Kade was at the kitchen pump, filling a large pot with water. He glanced up as she descended, and his eyes immediately went to her throat. Felicity saw the exact moment he registered what he was seeing, watched his entire body go rigid. The pot overflowed, water spilling onto the floor, but he did not seem to notice. When he spoke, his voice had gone ice cold. "Who did that to you?" Felicity's hand flew to her throat instinctively, covering the bruises. "It is nothing. It is in the past. Like hell it is nothing." Kade set the pot down with barely controlled force and crossed the room to her, stopping a few feet away as if afraid to get too close. "Those are handprints, Felicity. Someone tried to strangle you, and not that long ago from the look of them." His jaw clenched, muscles jumping beneath his skin. "Was it your uncle?" "No." She wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly cold despite the warm evening. "My uncle's business partner. A man named Victor Crane. He wanted to marry me after my parents died, but I refused. He did not take the rejection well. Did he force himself on you?" The question was asked in that same deadly calm voice, and Felicity suddenly understood that Kade Norwood was far more dangerous than his easygoing demeanor suggested. "No. He tried, but my screams brought help before he could do more than this." She gestured to her throat. "My uncle was afraid of what Victor might do next, afraid of the scandal. So he arranged this marriage and sent me away as quickly as possible." Kade was silent for a long moment, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. "If this Victor Crane ever shows his face anywhere near my property, I will kill him. I want you to understand that. I am not a violent man by nature, but I will not tolerate anyone hurting you again." The fierce protectiveness in his voice brought tears to Felicity's eyes. "He will not come here. He has no reason to follow me all the way to Wyoming. You better hope you are right about that." Kade took a deep breath, visibly forcing himself to relax. "I am sorry. I did not mean to frighten you. But seeing those marks on you, knowing someone hurt you like that, it makes me want to break things." "You did not frighten me," Felicity said softly. "You are the first person who has been angry on my behalf rather than at me for causing trouble. That means more than I can say." Kade's expression softened and he gestured to the table. "Sit down. Let me make us some coffee and we can talk. Really talk, I mean. If we are going to make this marriage work, we need to be honest with each other." Felicity sat, and Kade busied himself at the stove, setting coffee to boil and slicing bread from a fresh loaf in the pantry. He moved with easy competence, clearly comfortable in the domestic space, and Felicity found herself studying him with new eyes. He was handsome in a rough-hewn way, all strong lines and weathered strength, but it was his kindness that truly drew her. He had been nothing but respectful and considerate since the moment they met, and now he was offering her the one thing she desperately needed: honesty without judgment. When the coffee was ready, he poured 2 cups and sat across from her, his long legs stretched out under the table. "I will go first," he said. "I wrote those letters to you because I am lonely, plain and simple. I have been running this ranch by myself for 2 years now, and it gets wearing, having no one to talk to except the hired hands and the cattle. My father always said a ranch needs a woman's touch to truly feel like a home, and I think he was right. But more than that, I wanted a partner. Someone to build a life with, to share the good times and the bad. I know that probably sounds foolish to you, given that we barely know each other, but it is the truth." "It does not sound foolish," Felicity said quietly. "I wrote back to you because I was desperate, but also because your letters made you seem kind. "And you are kind, Kade, more than I dared hope for. Tell me about your parents," he said gently, "if you want to." So she did. She told him about her father, a clerk in a shipping office who had dreamed of better things for his only daughter. About her mother, who took in sewing to help make ends meet and sang while she worked. About the cholera outbreak that swept through Kansas City last spring, taking both of them within a week of each other. About her uncle, her father's brother, who took her in but saw her as a burden rather than family. About Victor Crane and his unwanted attention, his growing obsession, and finally his attack in the alley. Kade listened without interrupting, his expression growing darker with each detail. When she finished, he reached across the table and covered her hand with his own, a simple gesture of comfort that made her breath catch. "You have been through hell," he said quietly. "I am sorry for all of it, every bit of pain you have suffered. But I promise you, your life here will be different. I cannot change your past, but I can give you a safe future. Will you give me a chance to prove that?" Felicity looked into his blue eyes and saw only sincerity. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I will." They talked late into the evening, sharing stories about their childhoods, their hopes, their fears. Kade told her about growing up on the ranch, learning to ride and rope and read the weather. About his mother's death from pneumonia and his father's slow decline into grief. About the hard work of building his herd and the satisfaction of seeing his cattle thrive. Felicity found herself laughing at his stories about stubborn livestock and unexpected mishaps, the sound feeling rusty but wonderful. When exhaustion finally overtook them both, Kade walked her upstairs and paused at her bedroom door. "Sleep well, Felicity. Tomorrow I will show you around the property, introduce you to the hands, let you get your bearings. I look forward to it." She hesitated, then stood on her toes and pressed a quick kiss to his cheek. "Thank you for being so understanding." Kade's hand came up to touch where her lips had brushed his skin, and his eyes held a warmth that made her stomach flutter. "Good night, wife. Good night, husband." Felicity lay awake for a long time that night, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the prairie and thinking about the man sleeping downstairs. She had come to Wyoming expecting a business arrangement, nothing more. But there was something about Kade Norwood that called to her, something that made her want more than just safety. For the first time since her parents died, she felt the stirring of hope, fragile but real. Morning came bright and early with rooster calls and the sound of Kade moving around downstairs. Felicity dressed quickly in her oldest dress, one suitable for work, and braided her long brown hair into a practical plait. When she came downstairs, she found Kade at the stove, frying eggs and bacon. "Good morning," he said with a smile that transformed his serious face. "I hope you slept well." "Better than I have in months," she admitted. The bruises on her throat were already starting to fade, the yellow tinge suggesting they would be gone completely within a week or two. She no longer felt the need to hide them, not from Kade. They ate breakfast together, and then Kade took her on a tour of the property. He introduced her to the two hired hands, Sam and Daniel, brothers from Colorado who treated her with easy respect and welcomed her warmly. He showed her the barn, where a beautiful Palomino mare stood in one of the stalls. "This is Sunshine," Kade said, stroking the horse's golden neck. "She is the gentlest creature on the ranch. I thought you might want to learn to ride, so I picked her specifically for her calm temperament." Felicity reached out tentatively to touch the mare's soft nose. "I have never been on a horse in my life." "Then we will start slow. But out here, riding is pretty much essential. The ranch is big and walking everywhere gets old fast." He grinned at her. "Do not worry, I am a patient teacher." Over the next few weeks, Felicity settled into ranch life with a sense of wonder. Kade was indeed a patient teacher, showing her how to ride Sunshine around the corral until she felt confident enough to venture farther. He taught her about the cattle, how to recognize signs of illness or injury, how to mend fences and patch barn roofs. She threw herself into the work with determination, grateful to have purpose and occupation after the idle, fearful months in Kansas City. But more than the work, she found herself drawn to Kade himself. He was unfailingly kind, but also funny and intelligent, with a dry wit that caught her off guard and made her laugh. He never pushed her for more than she was ready to give, content to let their relationship develop naturally. They fell into an easy routine of shared meals and evening conversations, and Felicity found herself looking forward to those quiet moments together more than anything else in her day. The bruises on her throat faded completely, and with them, some of the fear that had haunted her. She started sleeping better, dreaming less of Victor Crane's cruel hands and more of golden prairie grass and blue eyes. One evening in early September, they were sitting on the porch watching the sunset when Kade finally broached the subject that had been hovering between them. "Felicity, I want you to know that I have fallen in love with you." She turned to stare at him, her heart suddenly pounding. "What? I know it has only been a few weeks, and I know we married for practical reasons, but somewhere along the way, this stopped being just an arrangement for me." He met her eyes steadily. "You are brave and strong and beautiful, and having you here has made this house into a home. I will not pressure you to feel the same way, but I wanted you to know the truth." Felicity felt tears sliding down her cheeks before she even realized she was crying. "I love you too," she whispered. "I think I started falling the moment you promised to kill anyone who tried to hurt me again." Kade laughed, a sound of pure joy, and pulled her into his arms. This kiss was different from the chaste peck he had given her at their wedding. This was deep and passionate, full of weeks of pent-up longing and new love. Felicity melted into him, her hands coming up to tangle in his hair, and for the first time in her life she understood what it meant to truly desire someone. "Will you come to my room tonight?" Kade asked softly when they finally broke apart, both breathless. "I want to make you my wife in truth, but only if you are ready." "I am ready," Felicity said, and meant it with her whole heart. "I trust you, Kade. I love you." That night, in the big bed upstairs, Kade showed her what it meant to be loved by a good man. He was gentle and patient, taking his time to ease her fears and bring her pleasure, and when they finally joined together, she felt complete in a way she never had before. Afterward, he held her close, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her skin. "I will never let anyone hurt you again," he murmured against her hair. "You are mine now, and I take care of what is mine." "And you are mine," Felicity replied, pressing a kiss to his chest. "I take care of what is mine, too." Life settled into a new rhythm after that. Felicity moved her belongings downstairs to Kade's room, and they shared a bed every night, wrapped in each other's arms. The work was still hard, the days still long, but everything was easier with Kade by her side. They worked together during the day and loved each other at night, and Felicity had never been happier. In October, when the cattle buyers came through, and Kade made a significant profit on his herd, he took her into town and bought her a new dress, a beautiful blue calico that matched her eyes. They had dinner at the hotel restaurant where they had eaten on their wedding day, and she marveled at how much had changed in such a short time. The first snow fell in November, blanketing the prairie in white, and Felicity discovered she loved the winter beauty of Wyoming. She and Kade spent cozy evenings by the fire, reading aloud to each other or simply talking. He taught her to play chess, and she taught him to dance, humming waltzes while they spun around the kitchen. It was during one of those peaceful December evenings that Felicity realized she had missed her monthly courses twice. She said nothing at first, not wanting to raise false hopes, But when January came and went without any sign, she finally told Kade her suspicions. His reaction was everything she could have hoped for. He swept her up in his arms, spinning her around the kitchen with a whoop of joy that made her laugh. "We are having a baby," he kept repeating, his voice full of wonder. "Felicity, we are having a baby." "It seems we are," she agreed, happiness bubbling up inside her like champagne. The pregnancy was not easy. Felicity suffered from terrible morning sickness for the first few months, and Kade hovered over her like a concerned mother hen, bringing her dry toast and peppermint tea, rubbing her back when she was ill. But she did not mind the discomfort, because it meant she was carrying Kade's child, a living symbol of their love. It was in late February, nearly 6 months after her arrival in Fort Laramie, that trouble finally found them. Felicity was in the chicken coop gathering eggs when she heard a horse approaching. She looked up and felt her blood turn to ice. Victor Crane sat astride a large bay gelding, his familiar stocky frame looking even more menacing in the harsh winter light. He smiled when he saw her, a cruel expression that made her stomach turn. "Hello, Felicity. Did you really think I would let you go so easily?" Felicity dropped the basket of eggs and ran for the house, her skirts tangling around her legs. She could hear Victor dismounting behind her, his heavy footsteps crunching in the snow. She reached the porch and screamed for Kade, her voice raw with terror. Kade appeared in the doorway instantly, rifle in hand. His eyes took in the situation in a heartbeat, and his expression went deadly calm. "Get inside, Felicity." "She is my woman," Victor snarled, advancing across the yard. "Her uncle owed me money and he promised me her as payment. She belongs to me." "She belongs to herself," Kade said, his voice that same ice-cold tone Felicity had heard only once before. "And she is my wife, legally married. You have no claim on her, Crane. Get off my property before I shoot you for trespassing." "You will have to kill me first." Victor reached for the pistol at his hip. He never cleared leather. Kade's rifle came up in one smooth motion, and the shot echoed across the prairie like thunder. Victor crumpled to the ground, clutching his shoulder, his gun falling into the snow. Sam and Daniel came running from the barn, rifles ready, but Kade waved them off. "Get into town and bring back the sheriff," he ordered. "Tell him we had an attempted assault on my property." The brothers rode off immediately, and Kade kept his rifle trained on Victor, who was moaning in the snow. Felicity stood frozen on the porch, one hand pressed to her slightly rounded belly, unable to believe what had just happened. "Are you all right?" Kade called without taking his eyes off Victor. "Yes," she managed. "Kade, you shot him." "I promised I would protect you. I keep my promises." His voice was still cold, utterly calm. "He is lucky I only shot his shoulder. I wanted to put the bullet through his skull." The sheriff arrived an hour later with Sam and Daniel, and after hearing the story from everyone present, he arrested Victor on charges of assault and attempted abduction. The wound in his shoulder was not life-threatening, and he would live to stand trial, though the sheriff assured them that he would hang for his crimes. As they watched the lawman ride away with his prisoner, Kade finally lowered his rifle and pulled Felicity into his arms. She was shaking, delayed shock setting in, and he held her tight against his chest. "It is over," he murmured into her hair. "He can never hurt you again. You are safe, Felicity, you are safe." She clung to him, letting his strength surround her. "You saved me, again." "Always," he promised. "For as long as I draw breath, I will keep you safe." That night, wrapped in Kade's arms in their warm bed, Felicity finally allowed herself to believe it. The nightmares that had plagued her for months began to fade, replaced by dreams of the future. Victor Crane was behind bars, soon to face justice for his crimes. She was married to a man who loved her fiercely and protected her without hesitation. and she was carrying their child, a new life that represented everything good and hopeful in her world. Spring arrived with a burst of wildflowers across the prairie, and Felicity's belly swelled with their growing baby. Kade was attentive and adoring, building a cradle in the evenings and talking to her stomach as if the child could already hear him. They learned in May that Victor Crane had indeed been hanged for his crimes, including the murder of another woman he had attacked years before. The news brought Felicity a sense of closure she had not expected, a final chapter closing on that dark period of her life. In July of 1877, just over a year after Felicity had arrived in Fort Laramie, she gave birth to a healthy baby boy. The labor was long and difficult, but Kade stayed by her side through all of it, holding her hand and whispering encouragement. When the midwife finally placed the squalling infant in her arms, Felicity looked down at his tiny red face and felt her heart expand to impossible proportions. "He is perfect," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "He is beautiful, just like his mother." Kade pressed a kiss to her sweaty forehead, his own eyes bright with emotion. What should we name him? They had discussed names for months but never quite decided. Now, looking at their son, Felicity knew exactly what she wanted to call him. Thomas, after the Reverend who married us. And James, after your father. Thomas James Norwood. Kade tried out the name, then smiled. "I like it. It is strong." Young Thomas proved to be a content baby, sleeping well and nursing easily. Kade was a devoted father, waking with Felicity for night feedings and walking the floor when the baby was fussy. She watched her husband cradle their son with such tenderness and fell even more deeply in love with him. The years that followed were filled with hard work and deep happiness. The ranch prospered, the herd growing year by year. Thomas grew into a bright, active toddler with his father's blue eyes and his mother's dark hair. In 1879, Felicity gave birth to twin girls, Emma and Grace, who looked like miniature versions of her. Kade was outnumbered by females and claimed to love every minute of it. They added onto the house, building more bedrooms and a larger kitchen. They bought more land, expanding their holdings. Sam and Daniel both married and built homes nearby, their wives becoming close friends with Felicity. The ranch became a true homestead, full of life and laughter and love. On their 10th wedding anniversary in 1886, Kade took Felicity back to Fort Laramie for a celebration dinner at the hotel. They sat at the same table where they had eaten on their wedding day, and Felicity marveled at the passage of time. She was 30 now, Kade 33, and they had 3 beautiful children waiting for them at home with Emma, Sam's wife, watching them. "Do you remember how scared I was that first day?" Felicity asked, reaching across the table to take Kade's hand. "I remember thinking you were the bravest woman I had ever met, traveling all this way to marry a stranger." Kade squeezed her fingers gently. "I also remember the moment I saw those bruises on your throat and wanted to kill the man who put them there." Your voice went ice cold, Felicity recalled with a slight shiver. I had never heard anything like it. It was terrifying and comforting at the same time, knowing someone cared enough to be that angry on my behalf. I fell in love with you that day, I think. Or maybe it was earlier when you touched your collar so nervously on the stagecoach platform. Or perhaps it was in your letters when you wrote about wanting a fresh start and a chance at happiness. Kade lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles. Whenever it happened, I have never regretted it for a single moment. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Felicity Norwood. And you are my salvation, she replied softly. You gave me a home when I had none, love when I had given up hope of ever finding it, and a family I treasure more than anything in this world. I love you, Kade, more than words can possibly express. They kissed across the table, uncaring of the other diners, lost in their own private world. When they finally broke apart, both were smiling. "Let us go home," Kade said. "Back to our children and our ranch and our life together. Because as much as I enjoy fancy dinners, nothing makes me happier than being home with you." "Nothing makes me happier either," Felicity agreed. They rode back through the summer twilight, the prairie golden in the fading light. Ahead of them, the lights of their ranch house glowed warm and welcoming. Felicity could hear Thomas shouting with laughter as the twins chased him around the yard, could see smoke rising from the chimney, could smell supper cooking. This was home. This was love. This was everything she had never dared dream of during those dark days in Kansas City, when Victor Crane's hands were wrapped around her throat, and death seemed preferable to the future stretching before her. But she had survived, had escaped, had found her way to this beautiful place and this wonderful man. She had built a life worth living, filled with purpose and passion and joy. Kade helped her down from the wagon, his hands lingering on her waist. "Happy anniversary, my love." "Happy anniversary," she echoed, standing on her toes to kiss him once more. The children came running, demanding their attention, and Kade scooped up the twins while Thomas attached himself to Felicity's skirts. They went into the house together, a family complete and whole, ready for whatever the future might bring. Because they had something Victor Crane could never touch and the past could never take away. They had each other, and that was enough. That was everything. The evening passed in familiar domestic comfort, with baths and bedtime stories and good-night kisses. When the children were finally asleep, Kade and Felicity sat on their porch in the warm summer darkness, his arm around her shoulders, her head on his chest. Above them, stars scattered across the vast Wyoming sky like diamonds on velvet. "You ever think about how different things could have been?" Felicity asked softly. "If I had not answered your advertisement, if I had stayed in Kansas City, if Victor had succeeded in his attack?" "No," Kade said firmly. "I refuse to think about those possibilities because they did not happen. You did answer my advertisement. You did come to Fort Laramie. You did become my wife, and we built this beautiful life together." He tilted her chin up so he could see her face in the starlight. "The past is dead and buried, Felicity. All that matters is right now, this moment, with you in my arms and our children sleeping safely inside. This is what is real." She smiled, feeling the last lingering shadow of fear finally release its hold on her heart. "You are right. The past is gone, and the future is ours to shape however we choose. And I choose to shape it with you, every single day for the rest of my life." They sat in peaceful silence, listening to the night sounds of the prairie, the distant lowing of cattle, the soft chirping of crickets. This was their kingdom, built from hard work and love, and nothing could take it from them now. Years continued to pass in this manner, each one bringing new challenges and new joys. In 1889, their youngest child was born, another son they named William after Felicity's father. The ranch continued to thrive, becoming one of the most successful operations in Wyoming. Thomas grew into a fine young man who loved ranching as much as his father, already showing skill with horses and cattle. The twins were beautiful and bright, keeping everyone on their toes with their matching mischief. Felicity became a respected member of the Fort Laramie community, known for her kindness and her strong spirit. She organized church socials and helped new brides adjust to frontier life, always remembering how frightened and alone she had felt during her own arrival. She never forgot where she came from or what she had survived, but she no longer let it define her. She was Mrs. Kade Norwood, successful rancher's wife, mother of 4, beloved member of her community, and most importantly, deeply loved and cherished woman. Kade kept every promise he had ever made to her. He protected her, respected her, loved her with a constancy that never wavered. He was an equal partner in their marriage, valuing her opinions and including her in all decisions about the ranch. He was a devoted father, teaching his children by example what it meant to be honorable and kind. And he was a passionate husband, still making her blush and laugh even after years of marriage. On their 20th anniversary in 1896, their children threw them a surprise party, inviting friends and neighbors from all over the county. The house was packed with people, all celebrating the love story that had become almost legendary in the area. The mail-order bride who arrived with bruises on her throat, and the cowboy whose voice went ice-cold when he saw them, who vowed to protect her and spent 2 decades proving that promise true. During the party, Thomas stood to make a toast, now a handsome young man of 19. "I want to thank my parents for showing me and my sisters what true love looks like. Pa taught me that a real man protects those weaker than himself and treats women with respect and honor. Ma taught me that strength is not about never being afraid, but about being brave even when you are terrified." Together, they built something beautiful here, and I am proud to be their son. Felicity was crying openly by the time he finished, and Kade's eyes were suspiciously bright as well. They stood together, surrounded by their children and friends, and felt overwhelmed by the richness of their lives. That night, long after the guests had gone home and the house was quiet, Kade and Felicity lay in their bed and talked about the journey that had brought them to this moment. "Do you remember what you said to me on our wedding night?" Felicity asked. "You said you could not change my past, but you could give me a safe future." "I remember," Kade confirmed, his fingers threading through her hair. "You gave me so much more than safety, though. You gave me love and respect and partnership. You gave me children and a home and a place in the world. You gave me myself back, the woman I was always meant to be before fear and violence nearly destroyed me." She turned in his arms to face him. "Thank you, Kade. Thank you for seeing past the bruises to the person underneath. Thank you for being patient while I healed. Thank you for loving me so completely." "Loving you has been the easiest thing I have ever done," Kade said simply. "You came into my life like a miracle I did not know I needed, and you have made every single day since then better just by being in it. I am the one who should be thanking you, Felicity, for taking a chance on a lonely cowboy and building this incredible life with me." They made love then with the passion and tenderness of long familiarity, knowing each other's bodies as well as they knew their own. Afterward, Felicity fell asleep in Kade's arms, safe and loved and content. The new century arrived, bringing changes to the West. Automobiles appeared in Fort Laramie, though Kade stubbornly insisted horses were more reliable. The railroad expanded, making travel easier. But through all the changes, the Norwood Ranch remained a constant, a testament to hard work and enduring love. Thomas married a sweet girl named Catherine in 1902 and took over more of the ranch operations, allowing Kade to slow down slightly. The twins married brothers from a neighboring ranch in a double wedding that was the social event of the year. William grew tall and strong, showing a gift for handling livestock that rivaled his father's. Kade and Felicity became grandparents multiple times over, their house often filled with the sound of children's laughter once again. They grew older together gracefully, silver threading through their hair, lines deepening on their faces, but their love never dimming. If anything, it grew stronger with each passing year, tempered by time and trial into something unbreakable. In 1910, on a beautiful spring morning much like the one when Felicity had first arrived in Wyoming 34 years earlier, she and Kade sat on their porch watching their grandchildren play in the yard. Kade was 70 now, Felicity 64, and they had lived a full and beautiful life together. "You have any regrets?" Kade asked, his weathered hand clasping hers. Felicity thought about the question seriously, looking back over the decades of their marriage. She thought about the young woman who had stepped off that stage coach so long ago, bruised and frightened and desperate. She thought about the cowboy who had promised to keep her safe and had spent the rest of his life fulfilling that vow. She thought about their children and grandchildren, the ranch they had built, the love that had sustained them through good times and bad. "Not a single one," she said finally. "Every choice I made, every step I took led me here to you. How could I regret any of it?" "Good," Kade said with satisfaction, "because I do not regret a single moment either. Even the hard times were worth it because we faced them together." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun climb higher in the sky, feeling the warmth on their faces. This was peace. This was contentment. This was the happy ending that neither of them had dared hope for in the beginning, but which they had worked together to create. Their story became the stuff of family legend, passed down through generations. The tale of the mail-order bride who arrived with bruises on her throat and the cowboy whose voice went ice-cold when he saw them. The couple who fell in love despite impossible circumstances and built an empire together on the Wyoming prairie. The partnership that lasted through decades and became the foundation for an entire family dynasty. But for Kade and Felicity, it was never about legend or legacy. It was simply about two people who found each other when they needed it most and chose love every single day afterward. It was about healing and hope and the courage to start over. It was about promises kept and trust earned. It was about building something beautiful from broken pieces, and in the end, that was enough. That was everything. That was their happily ever after. Hard-won and deeply cherished. A love story for the ages written in the Wild West and sealed with a kiss that lasted a lifetime.